Hi, making this video of me reviewing some self-made Anki cards, and I'm doing this basically because there's been a few videos recently of spaced repetition users showing themselves doing incremental reading, and I found this quite helpful. So I thought that I would try to contribute back and show a video of me doing my own process. I'm not going to go into detail here on what incremental reading is, but I'll add some readings into the description. And it's actually my first time, I think, making a video. So I'm going to keep it really simple. And I'm just going to show my flashcard reps. And they're almost entirely flashcards that I've made while doing incremental reading. So I'm going to review the flashcards in Anki. And I want to note that there are a lot of packages you can use that are all-in-one solutions that allow you to review flashcards and do incremental reading in tandem. So some examples would be SuperMemo or RemNote. However, I don't do this. I review them separately. So I make flashcards and review them in Anki, but then I do my incremental reading separately in Obsidian and Zotero. Okay, so now I'm going to start reviewing some of the cards and explain a bit the formulation of each card. So the answer here is ATAC-SEC. And as you can see, I always have just again versus good. I don't have different easy, medium, hard for the feedback. I find it simpler to just have two buttons. This is a card that I made from reading some biology paper that I've been studying recently. And this was a method that I'd come across before, but I made the card because sometimes when I would see it in the text, I would kind of forget what it did. And I'm just going to edit the card because there's a typo. So you can also see here on my cards, it's quite simple. I just have the text with a close, and then in the tags, I'll often have the citation key for the paper where the paper that I was reading when I made the card, single guide RNA. So this is just a definition card. So the answer here is to what command do you use to run multiple processes from one terminal? Oh yeah, I guess so. This is kind of a technicality. I would use it if I wanted to run multiple processes in the terminal, but actually explicitly what one instance of NoHub does is it allows me to run a process detached from the current terminal. And then I can do stuff in that terminal whilst running it. So sometimes if I come across a command that I need to use once that I think I'll use many times, I'll make a card on it. I'm a bit undecided on how useful this actually is, because if you do use the command fairly frequently, you'll probably use it enough to remember it and won't need an Anki card. For this one in particular, I made it because the command is very useful, but I sort of go through bursts where I use the command a lot. And then times when I'm not doing any kind of scientific computing problems, I would not use it for quite a while. I'm actually going to mark this as wrong just to make sure that I get the more precise recall next time. So in a probability space, the event space is sort of going to be all of the things you could observe that you would be interested in. So it could be all relevant subsets of the sample space, for example. Yeah, so I'd mark this as good. So this is really a card where it doesn't maybe have a source from IR. It's something that I already know from a long time ago, but then maybe want to make a card on it just to make sure that it comes up a lot in something new that I'm reading. I maybe want it a little bit fresher in my mind so that I can pass the reading material more easily. So this is a command that allows you to check what jobs are running in the terminal, and it misses some jobs because it only shows you jobs that were run from the current terminal. It doesn't show you all jobs running on the machine. For example, if I launched jobs from two separate terminals. So this card is kind of more of a vibes card where I try to give an English understanding of sort of a technical definition, and it's a sample space. Yeah, these are just a few cards I made just to have definitions from probability space and super sharp for while I was reading a book on stochastic processes. Untranslated region. I have a lot of definition cards. Oh yeah, so there's sort of an analogy here to explain like a specific phenomena, I guess. And I remember the example exactly because it's not a very old card. So the example is, imagine you're throwing a javelin You don't need every member of the sampling space to exactly be in the event space, because more so you're probably, when you're measuring continuous distances of how far like a javelin is thrown, you maybe more so care about intervals like 50 to 55 meters, 55 to 60 meters, 50 to 60 meters, etc. You don't really so much care about specific like continuous values of how far the javelin is thrown. Index event space. So yeah, this is something frustrating about Anki. You can have the settings such that it doesn't show you two cards from the same note in a single session. However, if you have two different notes that are basically about the same thing, you can get them in the same session. You know, I'd prefer it if I didn't get tons of very similar cards about event spaces that I made recently all at the same time. But I don't think it's a huge deal. They kind of will eventually, there's some randomness in the scheduling, so eventually they will start spacing out. Gaussian process. Yeah, this is also a card where it's sort of something I know, like it's not really clear if I really needed to make it a card. So this is a card that's terribly formulated. And it's actually from a class that I took where I was sort of cramming somewhat the test, so I just made a shit ton of cards, and I haven't really gone back and reformulated it. Often with these cards, if I can't be bothered to reformulate it in the moment, I'll flag an orange flag so that if I see it again later, I can either delete it or improve the formulation. But this is not atomic enough, you know, it's a huge list. And NGS here is next generation sequencing. So I think after you've broken up your DNA into pieces of a chosen size, you would then add your adapter sequences, which is something you need to add before you can then put them in the flow cell. Sample space. So I have some language cards in here. I actually do have decks for learning languages. I don't really add cards like this anymore. It's to tell, by the way. But I do have a few of these in my main deck where it's not clear where else to put them. Most of the language cards I have are either from a pre-made deck or they're in a specific deck that I have from sentence mining that I started recently. I think this current solution I have where these sort of random loose cards that I make go in my main deck is fine. Peg verb in English. It's to like throw out the trash or something like this. Yeah, throw away, the verb to throw away. See, this is where maybe I wish I had more fine-grained responses because I didn't really get it wrong, but I kind of struggled. In this case, I'm going to mark it as good. So in a Bernoulli process, stochastic process where every random variable in the set is just an IID sample from a Bernoulli distribution. Demultiplex. So here, like on this card, sometimes maybe I just want a little bit of context to make it easier because I'm switching topics a lot, so I just throw genomics on the front. Just going to map from event space to 0, 1. So this is the paper I'm reading, RNA velocity. And yeah, so I try not to make too many cards about a specific paper, you know, more so I'll extract more general facts and then just include the citation marker as a tag so I can search for it. But sometimes if I'm sort of reading a paper that's quite new for me or contains a lot of ideas that I haven't seen before, I may make a card specific for that paper so that I can sort of review that card, and then it makes the paper easier to pass when I get it again in the incremental reading queue. In reality, I would expect that both of these methods are actually relatively common for estimating pseudo time. However, I just haven't seen that many different papers on genomics, I guess. So it's hard for me to make a more general card at this point, but probably eventually I'll delete this card. Single guide RNA. So yeah, this thing that Anki does where you have a new card and you see it twice. Sometimes I like this if the card is harder, but then sometimes for easy cards it's kind of annoying. Fast food's German again. I don't put any context on here because all the language ones in here are German. Again, I think this card is kind of bad. The answer's just too long, but Sanger sequencing. It's another genomics card, more like a basic building block from studying some lecture slides. Yeah, like some of the language cards, like the way I put the context on is not really consistent, but it doesn't really matter so much. I really like these cards where I have to explain something in plain English. So here I would say the Wiener process is a stochastic process where the difference between two random variables with an interval t between them is sampled from a Gaussian distribution whose variance depends on the time t between the two variables. So sometimes on the language cards, or even on the non-language cards, I'll have certain bits bolded because other parts may be part of a sentence, but really I just care about getting this part correct. And Kopfschmerzen, we run a command detached from the terminal. Used to spend time Pascal, a basic history card. So this was a gene that was mentioned in a paper I was reading, and I think it's quite actually commonly used, but I didn't recognize it, so I just made a card on it. But it's a bit like green fluorescent protein. It's a gene that encodes a protein that glows red. So again, this is another cramming card that I made, but I think the formulation's kind of bad because the answer kind of gives way more information than really is required to answer the question. So I'll probably come back and reformulate this sometime. So in step 1, they add a reversible terminator to the end of the current sequence before an image is captured, and this reversible terminator is a base with a reversible terminator on the end of the base, and so you can only add that one base because the terminator does not allow another base to then be added until it's later washed off in part 3. It's going to be a dimensionality reduction. There's kind of 2 pretty clear steps when I was reading about trajectory inference, so pseudoton computation, and so I made a card about it, kind of like a high-level card from reading about this topic. Demultiplex. Okay, so that's all my reviews for the day. So it would be great to hear any feedback since I've done Anki for quite a long time, but the deck I'm currently working with is somewhat new because I took a long break. And if people found this interesting or useful, I'll follow up with a video demonstrating how I do the actual reading part of incremental reading. Thanks.